Hello, everybody. We're up to Daf Samach Amud Aleph. We're up to we'll start from the 2.4 lines on the top. Rabbi Eliezer says, Af al HaKlayim. Rabbi Eliezer says that in addition to the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, we also have Klayim, or a substitute for one of the mitzvahs, Klayim. And that is that a goy is not permitted, just like a yid, to crossbreed animals. Now, Klayim can mean shatnez, wool and linen. Klayim can mean working with two different animals, like we had yesterday, even perhaps a fish and a mammal. But when it comes to Klayim, by Sheva Mitzvahs, we're talking about only crossbreeding animals. And so, too, it says you shouldn't have Klayim when it comes to planting. So we're going to learn that Klayim by planting by a goy doesn't mean putting two seeds together like wheat and grapes, but rather if you already have an existing tree, you shouldn't graft a branch on it. Just like animals, we're talking about existing animals. So the Gemara said, no, I mean, how do you know to add that on? Amma Shmuel. Shmuel said, Amma Kra. Because it says in Pasuk that the following, Es chukoisai tishmeiru, you should keep my chukim, my ordinances. And then the Pasuk says, you shouldn't have klayim and you shouldn't plant klayim. So it starts off chukoisai, my pre-existing laws. When did Hashem give it earlier than before Matan Torah? So the pre-existing must be from Bnei Noach. Chukim they already gave you earlier. Then it says, and what shouldn't you do? Don't crossbreed animals. So obviously it was already given to them earlier on. And then the pasuk says, nor should you plant climb in your fields. Just like when it comes to animals, we're talking about crossbreeding. So to your field, we're talking about grafting a branch onto a tree. A further thing we learned from here, just like when it comes to an animal, it's not limited to a particular land. Where you live. So too when it comes to climb, makes no difference where they live. It's one of the 7 mitzvahs. Says the Gemara. The Gemara right now understood that the word chukaisai means pre-existing chukim. So I'm going to ask a very interesting question. It says that Hashem says you should keep all my chukim, all my laws. A person should do yasa oisa adam v'chai behem. A person should do them and live forever. And that's referring to the entire Torah. Well, according to you, chukaisai means the pre-existing laws. That means the entire Torah was given to Bnei Noach. I mean, the guy really should keep not just 7 mitzvahs, but the entire 613 mitzvahs. Following your logic, chukaisai means pre-existing. So what I mean, according to this, ushamartim es chukaisai ve'es mishpatai chukim shechalkakti l'chakvar. These are the laws that I already gave you before, according to your understanding. Says the Gemara, no. There's a fundamental difference. Hasam there ushmartem es chukaisai. Over there, where it says about regarding all the mitzvahs, it says shmartem, you should keep es chukaisai, my laws that I'm about to give you now. Chukaisai the hashta, the laws of today. Hachab, and the pasuk that we're talking about, Klayim, there it says first the word chukaisai, es chukaisai tishmeiru. Before Hashem says what keep them and observe them, he said chukaisai as if it was you already had the chukim, now it's time to keep them. So therefore, we're referring to pre-existing laws. So Klayim must have been given to the guy. Chukim d'miikara tishmer, the earlier laws you should follow. Amar Rabbi Shua bar Karcha said, and basically the rest of the Mishnah talks about a blasphemer. Says the Gemara, and then we talk about, and Shua bar Karcha says, how is it done? We have the witnesses tell the story. They don't explicitly say what the blasphemer said, so they say the words Yaka Yosi as Yosi. They say that Yosi is a reference to Hashem. We explained last time how. Rashi says the 4 letters. Also, those are Yud, Vav, Yud equals 26, which is Hashem's name. And Samach stands for Siman, a sign. So we're up to the Samach Amud Aleph by the 2 dots now, about 15 lines on top of the page. So Rabbi Shua bar Karcha said that, so you have the 2 witnesses, they front up before the Bezdin, they use all kinds of euphemisms rather than saying explicitly what the blasphemer said, and it says Yosi ben Yosi, and then the witnesses have to, everyone has to leave the room. They ask the witnesses to say precisely what was said, and then the Dayanim tear Kriya. And they all stand up and they tear Kriya because of what they heard. Hashem has a number of names. There are 7 names that are not to be erased. Which of the names are we talking about? We're talking about the name of 4 letters. La'afuke, and to exclude ben shtei oisius. If you use 2 letters, Hashem's name is Yud K Vav K. In a nutshell, there's an argument in Rashi and Rambam which name of Hashem we're using. According to Rashi, we're talking about the name Yud K Vav K. That's the only name that you use when we say that you're Chayiv Misa, that you have. If you said Yaka Yesi Yesi, that Yesi should curse Yesi. If you use Yud K Vav K. What about if you use 2 letters, Yud K, which is Hashem's name? For that, even though it's forbidden, you don't get killed for. The Rambam says it's not just Yud K Vav K, it's also the way we pronounce it, which is Aleph Daled Nun Yud. That's also included. So that's a fundamental argument between the Rambam and Rashi. So from this little piece of Gemara, it seems more like Rashi, that 2 letters, according to Rambam, Aleph Daled, what does Aleph Daled mean? But Yud K, obviously, it's part of Hashem's name. It is Hashem's name. We would have thought that it's sufficient. And tell you not. And we'll come back later. We'll show you where the Rambam gets his position from. Why would you think a 2-letter name is good enough? Yaka Yesi Es Yesi tonight. Says clearly Mishnah. Yesi Es Yesi has to be 4-letter. What's up Achba Yaakov adding that we already didn't know from the Mishnah? We already know it has to be 4 letters. So I would have thought the Mishnah wasn't being very particular. I would have thought Milsa Ba'almud. The Mishnah is giving an example. Doesn't really matter. No, it has to be precisely the 4-letter name, not any other name. Ikidam is another version. From here we learn out Shem Bain Arba Oisis Nami Shemu. From here we learn out that Hashem's name of 4 letters is also considered a name. What do you mean also considered a name? Pshita, that's Hashem's name. What do you mean also? No, Yak, it's and not only that. It says in the Mishnah, Yaki Yosi Es Yositna. No, Maute, I would have thought, Ad the Ikra Shem Rabba, until you have the larger name, Milsa Ba'almud Nukut, and we're just talking about, just giving an example, Kamash no, it has to be the 4-letter name. Now, what's Shem Rabba? So Rashi learns Shem Rabba means there's a name of Hashem that's 42 letters long, and it's called Shem Map. And that was only used in the Beis Hamikdash. So we would have thought that the only time you considered a blasphemer is to use that name. Says no, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's Rashi. The Rambam says no such thing as 4 letters. Shem Rabbah says the Rambam is Yud Kei Vav Kei. We would have thought that the only time you're liable for cursing is if you use Hashem's name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Comes to tell you that even if you don't use Yud Kei Vav Kei, as long as it's the 4-letter name of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, which is what we say today, that makes you liable as well. And then you're chayiv. Another argument between the Rambam and others is, do you need that? It says the way you express it to be chayiv skill is you have to say Yaka Yosi Es Yosi. That that Yosi should curse Yosi, and both of them are referring to Hashem's name. According to the Rambam, only the receiving end has to be the name of 4 letters, but not the cursor. The first name doesn't have to be, as long as any of the 7 names of Hashem, it's good enough. Or a kinui. According to Rashi, both sides, the first Yesi and the second Yesi both have to be 4 letters. Name the 4-letter name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Anyway, the Dayanim, they have to stand when they hear all this. Menon, how do you know that? The pasuk, the Eyud came to Eglon, the king of Moab, and he wanted to pass on to him a message. He was sitting there upstairs and it was cooling down, and he said to him, I was there on his own. Eyud said to him, I have a message to you from Hashem. And what was Eglon's response? Immediately, he stood up out of respect. He only knew, substitute names for Hashem, like nicknames, in their language, and not just the Shem HaMeforish. Omar, he stood up, Yisro, Yid, V'Shem HaMeforish, and using Hashem's name, Allah has come, surely you have to stand up. How do you know you have to, when they hear this blasphemy or the Adam repeating what happened, they have to tear the clothes? How do you know that? So what happened was Eliakim, Ben Chilkiyo came. It was a Sanhedrin, when he went and he surrounded Yerushalayim, but there's 186,000 soldiers. He sent a message by a person called Rabeshka, and he said to them that, and he taunted them that Hashem can't help you. Hashem can't help you. No, this Rav Shaka, as we understand right now, is a goy, and he came and he taunted them, and he said he committed blasphemy. So when they repeated Chizkiah, what happened? So Shevna Sefer, even though we call him for Russia, but Yaakov Shevna Sefer and Yoav ben Asaf, came to Chizkiah, Krubegadim. Their clothes were already ripped, and the reason is because when they heard the blasphemy, they had no choice. They told them over exactly what Rav Shaka said. And we'll come back to that soon. In certain cases, when you do Kriya, you no longer mend it. You no longer sew it back up. And in certain cases, you can. So in this case over here, when you do Kriya, you can no longer repair it. So how do you know? I'm going to ask you Kriya. We make a Gzer Shabbat, the word Kriya here and Kriya elsewhere. See how here it says Kriya Begadim. They came into Chizkiah, their clothes were torn. We'll see how it says there when Elisha was bidding farewell to his Rebbe Eliyahu Navi. It says over there, Elisha saw Abu Mitzai, and he was screaming out, Avi, Lechiv Yisrael. He was screaming out to Eliyahu Navi. He said, my father, Lechiv Yisrael, the chariot of the Eden, the Parasha. Elisha grabbed a hold of his clothes. Time he ripped them. Any they don't know shake pieces.
Is everyone else having trouble hearing?
Frozen.
Yeah.
Now you.
I don't know if he's hearing us, but it's breaking up.
Frozen.
Michael, you there?
Does anybody have his number?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Now.
Taliban, we learned. Echad Hashemeya.
The last few lines were totally broken up.
Okay, so I'll say the last lines again. Sorry. So we said, how do you know? Start again from Loy Ma'achin. We don't mend, and we don't mend. Once you rip the clothes, we don't mend it. Okay, Minola, how do you know that? Oh, whatever who said, Asya Kriya. We learn out Exeris Shabbat, the word ripping here and ripping elsewhere, that you can no longer repair it. See how here it says Kriya Begadim, that they fronted before Chizkiah, their clothes were torn. But see how from there it says Elisha saw who Mitzayik, and he screams to Eliyahu Navi when his teacher was about to go into heaven. Avi, Father, Echav Yisrael, the chariot of the Eden, the Parasham, and his whole retinue. He no longer saw him. Elisha grabbed a hold of his clothes, and he ripped them to two parts. Now, obviously, we have to say crime a second time. If you just said he ripped them into two, that's enough. Any crime that the two torn parts. Why he said that they were torn? Torn forever. If you heard somebody committing blasphemy using Hashem's name, the echad shemeya mipi shemeya. Even the judge who's hearing it from the witness who heard it from the original person, chayiv l'kroya. You have to tear your clothes to hear Hashem's name used in this way. But the witnesses, they don't have to tear it again. They already tore it when they heard it the first time. Says the Gemara, they heard it the first time. But they're saying it over again now. So shouldn't they have to tear it again? No, they don't have to tear again. Because the Chsiv, it says, Chizkiah heard. As begodav, and he ripped the clothes. He tore it. They didn't tear it. No, once you tore it once, you don't have to tear it again. I guess the blasphemer herself has a mitzvah to tear his clothes. It's only these Eidim, because they read a Torah once for about this particular scenario, they don't have to do it again. So the Gemara then continues. Vayikra Amar Rabbi Shmuel. So Rabbi Yehuda says in Rabbi Shmuel two din. Number one is Hashemei Hashkar and Piyah V'cham. If somebody hears that a goy is committing blasphemy, Ein Chai V'kroya. Today, you don't have to tear your clothes when you hear a goy committing it. Ibn Taymiyyah can ask me a question. What about Rav Shaka? Right, when they came in and they were all torn their clothes, when the Sanhedrin sent this person Rav Shaka out there to commit blasphemy, Yisrael Mumra actually was a Jew. He was a Jewish apostate and would join Sanhedrin. Now, fascinating. Who is this Rav Shaka? So, in the Gemara Brachas, there's a Hagoyas Habach, the Bach who wrote on every page of the Gemara practically different amendments. So the Gemara that tells the story how Chizkiah HaMelech didn't want to marry Shaya's daughter, and Hashem made him sick, and Shaya had to go visit him. And they had a discussion that Chizkiah deserved to die because he wasn't getting married, he wasn't having children. And Chizkiah, to protect himself or to defend himself, said, I can see that my son is going to be a Rasha. His son turned out to be Menashe, who was a Rasha. And Shai told him, it's none of your business, you got to do whatever she wants. And it turned out to be that Menashe killed Shai himself, his own grandfather. The Hagoyas Habach says over there that he actually had two sons, Chizkiah. One was called Menashe, but the other one was called Rav Shaka. This Rav Shaka was Chizkiah's son. Imagine that. And he went and joined Sanhedrin, and he committed blasphemy. Chizkiah HaMelech did not have much nachas from his kids. And they bring down, there's a pasuk in Yeshaya, I can't remember the pasuk, but there it says Omali Mar, and Mar is an abbreviation. It talks about Chizkiah HaMelech, and Mar is Mem Reish. Mem is Menashe, and Reish is Rav Shaka. They're going to cause me bitter sorrows, and that's who this Rav Shaka is. He's a Yisrael Mumara. He was a Yid, an apostate. V'Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda said, "Name Shmuel another did. Ein koidin el Hashem hamiyuchad b'levad." You don't tear kriya only on Hashem's unique name, the four-letter name. La fuke kinui delay. But if you only heard a substitute name or a euphemism, you don't, or any of the other seven names, you don't tear kriya at all. However, but this actually argues with Rab Chi on both counts. Rabbi said, Rabbi made the following comment, and we can infer from this comment that he totally disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda. He said, if you hear someone committing blasphemy today, you don't have to tear your clothes, rip your clothes, because if you're going to say that every time you hear blasphemy, you're going to have to tear your clothes, you're going to have a tattered shirt, because there's so many people who are committing blasphemy. Now, my man, what do you mean so many people are committing blasphemy? How many people who heard Ilema Yisrael? Could you imagine? You think that a Yid can commit blasphemy? Are you going to tell me that they're so? What's the right word? That they're so? I guess hefker. That like apokursim. That so many Yidden are going to go out there and commit blasphemy? Impossible. It must be talking about goyim. Number one, so we see that Rabbi Chia holds that even by goyim you have to tear kriya if you commit blasphemy. Number one. Number two is if you're going to tell me that the only time that you have to tear your clothes is if you hear the four-letter name of the Eibishter. Do they really know what Hashem's real four-letter name is? Ela lav bekinui. It's talking about even other names, substitute, and to the extent even other languages. And since, what is he claiming Rabbi Chia? The only reason why we don't have to tear kriya today is because it's so rife, it's too many. Only today because it's prevalent. But a long time ago, chayiv, you would have been chayiv. So we see clearly even a guy does it, even if you use euphemisms for Hashem's name as well, you have to tear your clothes. It's a good proof. We said you don't get skila unless you use the four-letter name Hashem HaMeforish, whether UK Vavke or Aleph Dal Nun Yud according to the Rambam. But that's it. Regarding kriya, in all instances you have to take kriya. Then the Mishnah said, when we call over the second witness, he doesn't have to repeat word for word again. We don't want to hear it a second time. He just says the words. He says, and I agree, or I'm on the same page as the other witness. I'm with him. Interesting halach. That af ani kamoyu, according to the Torah, if the second witness in any court case says, I agree with the testimony of the first witnesses, kosher. Regardless whether it's commercial disputes, regardless whether it's capital cases, in all cases, the second witness can say, technically, I agree with the first. It's only a stringency from the Rabbanon. We want to hear each witness spell it out so that we can tease out of them to see any contradictions and so on. In the case of the blasphemy, it's impossible to have the second witness repeat. It's just so wrong. So then we have no choice. So when you lean, we go back and rely on what the Torah says. The because if according to the Torah, the second witness actually has to testify, so then what excuse do we have not to have him testify? Because we don't like it, it's impossible because is Katrina or Gabriel going to kill a person if we're defying what the Torah says? Obviously, according to the Torah, the second witness can just say, I agree with the first witness. It's only the Rabbanan that we want to hear him say precisely the entire testimony. Then the Mishnah finished off. Then the third witness said the same thing. So the Gemara, where's the third witness coming in? What third witness? Normally you only have two witnesses. So it comes to teach you a novel halacha from Rabbi Akiva. And that is, that he says that you have three witnesses is just like you have two witnesses. You don't need a third witness. Nevertheless, if the third witness, for example, is a disqualified to be a witness, ruins the rest. If you are mazim, if you found two of the witnesses liars, we will not punish them if there was a third witness with them and he wasn't found to be a liar. That's what the Mishnah is trying to teach you as well. Okay, we're up to top of the page, the new Mishnah. We learned before in the Mishnah, and it spells out all the averas that you receive skill for stoning. Like in this week's parsha, we learn now how stoning is done. Sakul and all that. So the Mishnah then lists a whole bunch of averas, and now we're going through each of these averas to explain exactly what it is. See, the next subject, which is all about Avodah Zarah, actually belongs in Masechet Avodah Zarah. Yet here we are going to explain specifically what the Avodah Zarah is. Says the Mishnah. That if somebody, worships an idol, and now this is before we start. There's going to be there's different ways of serving an idol. One is the conventional way, how this particular idol, every idol is served differently. This is how we serve this idol. That's called kiddarka, the normal way. Then you have shaloi kiddarka. You worship an idol, but not the normal way for that particular idol. So then it depends. If it's done in a respectful way, then it's still an avera. You won't get killed for it, but it's still an avera. If it's done in a non-respectful way, then it's not really avodah zarah, except a few exceptions where that's how you worship the avodah zarah. Then that's like kedarka. And then you have certain specific ways of serving an avodah zarah that, regardless of whether it's the conventional way or not, you'll get killed for it. If you use the way we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Beis HaMikdash, for example, slaughtering an animal, shechting an animal, the libations you put in the Mizbeach, including sprinkling the blood, and if you take that, or if you do the incense, if you do these, or prostrating yourself before Avodah Zarah, if you do these things before any Avodah Zarah, even if it's not conventional, because it's becovered, and because this really was exclusively the domain of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you used it for Avodah Zarah, you will get killed. So these four makes no difference if it's the conventional way or not conventional way. Then you have all these other ones that if it's kedarka, conventional, then you'll be chayiv misa. If it's not that, as long as it's becovered the way, so then it's an avera. And then you have, if you do it shaloi kedarka, not the normal way. So now the Mishnah spells it out. Ha'ovid avodah chum, right? You serve avodah zarah. Echad ha'ovid, whether you are serving the avodah zarah, but doesn't tell us how. Which the Gemara is going to say, what does it mean, oived? How? But then the Mishnah spells out, echad hamizbeach, if somebody, echad hamizabeach, somebody slaughters an animal. Echad hamikate, if somebody goes ahead and burns incense, or you burn the carbon. Ve'echad hamenasech, or somebody pours libations or sprinkles the blood. Ve'echad hamashtachra, or whether one prostrates himself. These four, regardless of whether that's the normal way of serving this particular avodah zarah, you're always liable and you're chayiv misa. Then he says, "Ve'echad hamekable olav lelaha." You accept this avodah zarah or this person as your God. Or you say to a person, "You are my God," or she says to whatever it is, that you are my God. And Rashi says that one is talking about in front of the person, and the other one is saying even if the person not around, you're talking about the person distance, I'm a kabbalah. All of these cases, it's avodah zarah. But hamigav, if you do certain avodas which are not which not conventional way, but it's covered, then it's an avera, but you don't get killed for it. So, for example, hamigav. Let's say you embrace an ashik, you kiss, or chabit, you sweep, a merabitz, with your sprinkle water, a melachas, and you wash the floor, v'asach, and you smear, v'hamalbish, you dress, v'manel, you put shoes on. All of these, it's worshiping avodah zarah, but you don't get killed. Why? Because it's, even though it's bekovedik, it's not the normal way. If you make a neder in the name of avodah zarah, you say, I won't eat apple if I do this and this. All these apples are forbidden to me, and you use some avodah zarah name, or I'm a kayim b'shmoy, or you make a vow that I will do something, and you swear this in the God's name, in the idol's name. In all of these cases, you are over an avera. Then we have a couple of avodah zarahs, which for strange reasons, the way you serve them is in the most despicable, degrading way possible. One is a Baal Pa'or. The Pa'or is the way you serve the Baal Pa'or is by defecating. So hapoyer atzmel Baal Pa'or, if that's what you do, you defecate before the Baal Pa'or. Zui avedasa, that's its normal way, and therefore you are an idol worshiper for that particular avodah zarah. And there's another avodah called markulis. Markulis was basically a tripod. You had two stones on the bottom, and then you had one stone above. And the way you worship it is you throw stones at it, which is also pretty, degrading, throwing stones at avodah zarah. But if you do that by markulis, hazodik edla markulis zui avedasa, that's how you serve it. But if you throw stones at another avodah zarah, it's nothing. Or if you defecate from another avodah zarah, it's not avodah zarah. It's only because here this is the way to do it. This is the format. Says the Gemara, let's understand the Mishnah. You start off saying, "My echad oiv." Says somebody serves the avodah zarah, and then you give a whole bunch of cases. So when you said serving, what were you talking about? This is what the Mishnah is prefacing the whole Mishnah. If you serve any avodah zarah in the normal way of serving that avodah zarah, the conventional way, then you're chayiv misa. I don't care what it is. If that's how you do it, including the way you said before, later on, before the Mishnah, defecating for Baal Pa'or. If that's the normal way of doing it, you're chayiv. Then the Mishnah says there's another category where even if it's not the normal way of worshiping this particular avodah zarah, but these four avodas exclusively belong to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and if you use it for avodah zarah, you'll get killed as well. Echad hamazabech, you slaughter. Echad hamekater, if you roast incense or karbanos. Echad hamenasech, you pour wine or sprinkle blood. Echad hamishtachla, if you prostrate yourself. Afilu shalei kedarka, even if it's not the normal way, you're chayiv misa. Ask the Gemara if we're basically saying that all the service that we do in the Beis Hamikdash for Kabbanis belong in Hashem's domain. Why don't we include? Well, that's what Nami Zaydik. Why don't we include sprinkling of blood? Sprinkling is the same thing as pouring libations. It's the same thing. How do I know that? Because it says in Pasuk, Baal asich neskayim bedam. You should not pour their nesachim from blood. So we see clearly that it's called pouring is called blood is called nesachim. So we see sprinkled blood is called nesachim. Okay, so so how do we know all this? How do we know that that if it's conventional, you're always chayiv, but if it's non-conventional, you're not chayiv, even though it's covered. And when it comes to these four avodas, I don't care if it is conventional or not conventional, you're always chayiv. How do you know that? So the Gemara says as follows: today we read in the Torah, you're not allowed to serve avodah zarah. Obviously, it says loisa of them, you shouldn't serve avodah zarah. But we have another pasuk. Tell them what we learned. It says in another pasuk that zeveyach, if somebody slaughters leilehim to getchkes, to avodah zarah, to idols, yechrem should be put to death because the pasuk says "Bilti Hashem levadi." You used it for something outside of Hashem, and it belongs only to Hashem. So now the Gemara is going to learn as follows. So the Gemara will bring the brisa, and then we're going to analyze the brisa. The brisa is as follows. If the pasuk would have said "Zeveach Yechram," somebody slaughters an animal, it should be put to death. I'm thinking to myself, why should it be put to death? I would have said, we know where is it a problem slaughtering. If you take a carbon that should have been done in the base of Mikdash and you shechted it outside the base of Mikdash, that's called shchute chutz. And for that, the punishment is karis. So I would have thought that's what the pasuk is talking about. That's a veach. If somebody shecht shchute chutz, yachrim should be put to death. Therefore, the pasuk has to add the word leilahim, to the idols. The pasuk is talking about somebody who serves idols. Says the Gemara, ainly all I know from here is ela. So I know. So what do I know from this pasuk zeveach? That if it's a normal way of serving avodah zarah, I don't need a pasuk zeveach. The Torah already said, "Leisa of them, don't worship idols." So when the Torah has to highlight a particular activity, zeveach, there's a chiddush, and the novelty is that zeveach, when it comes to slaughtering an animal, even if that's not the normal way of serving this particular idol, you will be chayiv. That's what we learn from zeveach. Since it's b'kavadik, it belongs to Hashem. If you use it for any idol, you're liable, you're chayiv misa. So all I know is that particular activity, shechting. But in our Mishnah, we said shechting, we said libation, we said roasting, prostrating. How do you know all that? How do you know these other activities? It says in the very same pasuk, "Bilti Hashem levadi." You didn't do it. It belongs to Hashem, and you use it for something outside of Hashem. So we're talking about those three activities that was done in the base of Mikdash: shechting, and then the sprinkling or the pouring of the things on the mizbeach, and then the roasting. We threw away the avodas, we gave it over to Hashem. Now, the fish, compare everything to zvicha. Watch, these are the activities you did internally in the base of Mikdash. But what about the fourth one? Prostrating yourself. Where do you find in the base of Mikdash that when they made a carbon, they had to prostrate themselves? The pasuk is talking about zoveach, which is things to do with the carbon. How do you know minayin l'rabbidish tachava? How do you know bowing down and prostrating yourself is included for avodah zarah, regardless of whether it's a conventional way or not? You're chayiv misa. How do we know that? It says in pasuk, I don't want you by Yelech, Hashem, chastise them and warns them, admonishes them. I don't want by Yelech that you'll go, by you will go ahead and you'll serve other gods. By Yishtach them and you'll bow down to them. And then the next pasuk says, take that person out, and I want you to give him skill. Now, why to talk about the Yishtachlu? You just said Vayavoid. You already said he went and served the other avodah zarah, whatever the normal way is. You add Vayishtachlu to tell you that even if it's not the normal way, if you did that, you already deserve to be put to death. So okay, but we learned before a rule that even though the Torah said this is the punishment for this particular avera, somewhere in the Torah there had to be first a warning that you should make sure that you comply to this rule. So Oina Shemano, here's the punishment. Where's the warning? There's another pasuk where it says, "Ki lo yisishtachva." I don't want you to prostrate yourself to other gods. Okay, Yochel, the Bryce is still talking. We'll soon come to analyze it. Yochel, I would have thought, okay, once we've established, it's like bowing down, even though it's not the normal way of serving an idol, you're liable. So maybe anything which is b'derech kavod, anything which is, in an eminent way, it's edifying, if you worship an idol that particular way, maybe you should be liable. Yochel, I should include megafev, menashing, embracing, kissing, putting on shoes, that you should be chayiv skila. Therefore, we go back to say zeveyach. The Torah highlights two activities. Torah generally says don't serve any idols, but then it gives in two examples. One it says zvicha, shechting, and another one says bowing down. So we're going to decide that shechting is expansive. It doesn't mean only shechting; it means shechting and also pouring the wine or pouring blood, and it also means roasting. But when it says ishtachava, bowing down, it means strictly only bowing down. So from ishtachava, we learn out that as long as it's a bakavadik way of serving, I don't care if it's a conventional way or not, it's only limited to bowing down. When it comes to the other three of shechting and burning and all that, we say that those three avodas, you're chayiv whether it's conventional or not conventional. And so Zev, even though Torah says shechting, we expand it to include the other two avodas as well. So Tamalim is a ve'ach as vicha b'chal ha'isa. The chayda, when the Torah said don't serve idols, obviously one of the ways is, one of the methods is by slaughtering an animal. It was included. So why did I try to highlight this separately? Why? I mean, lahaki shalet, to compare to it, I'll tell you, maz vicha miyuchedesh. Just like shechting is unique. She avoidas pnim, it's an internal avoida in the base of English. The chayavna lamisa yechayiv misa. And if you worship idol, all other activities that were done inside the base of English, Yotza. So that's what we learn from Zerech. Yotzi shtachava. Then the Torah also spelled out bowing down. Lidain ba'atzma. Shtachava is only limited to itself, and that is that only hishtachava. If it's not done a conventional way, you're still chayiv misa. But any other activity like kissing, embracing, and all that, you won't be chayiv misa. You don't get killed for it. Okay, Yotza Zvicha leading al Kakul, but Zvicha comes to include the whole thing. Let's analyze the Brisa. First, you say, I would have thought, you started saying, I would have thought that this applies to the law of Shchuti Chutz, shechting animal outside the base of English. Now, the punishment here in the pasuk is he gets skila. The punishment for shechting outside the base of English is karis. So how can you even think that this pasuk of Zeveach Yechram is referring to Shchuti Chutz? Says the Gemara, I don't understand. You said, I would have thought, but Zeveach Kachim B'chutz, Hakash Medaber. Zeveach Kachim B'chutz, but shechting karbanas outside, karasu. You don't get killed as a stone for it, you get karas. So how can you even think that's what we're talking about here, when here we're talking about stoning? Says the Gemara, no. I would have thought, just like Shabbos, if somebody desecrates the Shabbos and there are two witnesses and there were warnings and everything else, the punishment is skila stoning. But what happens if there were no two witnesses, or they were, but they didn't warn him? Then there's no stoning and nothing happens. But karis will happen. So we would have thought maybe the same thing applies to shchuti chutz. So I would have thought ki asabeh, they warned him, tala, they would kill him. Ki loy asabeh, they didn't warn him, karis. Kamash Malan, we're not talking about shchuti chutz, we're talking about avodah zarah. Now, so Rabbi Bar Abchanan asks a question to Abaya, and this is what's going to be the next Gemara today and tomorrow, trying to understand Rabbi Abchanan's question. So first he asks a very simple question. How do you know that Zeveach is expansive and Ishtachava is limited to Ishtachava? You decide Ishtachava means that any avodah, Zeveach is describing avodas done internally in the base of English. Ishtachava is talking about not do it based on English. Any avodah which is bakavadik, anything which is edifying. So you decide ishtachava is limited only ishtachava, even though it's not the conventional way you're chayiv. But Zeveach teaches you that any activity in the base of English, even if it's not conventional, you're chayiv. How do you know? Maybe ishtachava is supposed to be expansive. Maybe ishtachava is coming to teach us that any avodah, if it's bakavadik, you're chayiv misa. For example, if you kiss the avodah zarah, maybe you're chayiv misa. How do you know that Ishtachava is coming to limit? Maybe Ishtachava is expansive, and Zeveach is coming to limit. Now, what exactly is Zeveach coming to teach you? We'll discuss in a minute. Why don't we say that Yotza Ishtachava l'lam l'chakulei? Why don't we say that let Ishtachava be expansive, and to teach you about anything to do with Avodah Zarah and the general rule? But that's the rule. And if you have a general rule, and then the Torah highlights one thing, then it's coming to reflect on the whole rule. Maybe it's coming to teach you that any bakavadik avodah, what's the coming for? Legufe, to teach you the following din. We have a concept we're learning Gemara Zvachim called pigul. Pigul is that if you have in mind that you're going to eat this carbon the wrong times. No, you can eat it. It's a carbon meant to be eaten one day. You can eat it for 2 days. The wrong zman. So pigul means, for example. So what happens? You shechted the carbon, and you had in mind that you're gonna eat the carbon for 2 days, spray it in 2 days, whatever it is. So you were doing one activity, and nothing wrong with this activity, but you had in mind to ruin the next activity. The thing is that you didn't avera, you chayav kares. What about by avodah zarah? You were shechting an animal, but you didn't think that the shechita should be for the avodah zarah, but you thought, you know what? I'm shechting this animal, but I plan to take the blood and use it for avodah zarah. The din is a machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. If we compare it to pigul and say, well, that's avodah zarah, and you're chayiv, even though you didn't do it, you're already chayiv kares. Or we say, or at least the animal is now avodah zarah. Or Reish Lakish said the animal itself is not avodah zarah because we don't compare it to pigul. So what's that to do with our Gemara here? We're going to say, the Gemara is going to attempt to say that the word zevech, which is extra, if we learn like Rabbi Baruch Chanan, that Hishtachva includes all kinds of avodas to the avodah zarah. If it's bakavadik, conventional, non-conventional, you're always chayiv. The Torah spells out zevech to tell you that avodah zarah, if you shechted an animal and you had a mind to do something with the blood, then the animal itself becomes avodah zarah. That's what zevech is coming to teach you. Yacharam, the animal is no good. Maybe that's shot. So you want to explain. Even when we learn how shechted somebody shecht an animal, had a mind to sprinkle the blood for avodah zarah, or he had a mind to roast the fat for avodah zarah. So the shechting, he had nothing, it was all right. It was the intention for another stage to do differently. Rabbi Yochanan says asura. Well, the animal is forbidden. It's just like pigul. And Ishlaki said muteret. The animal is permitted. The animal itself is permitted. It's not avodah zarah. So now, the animal is forbidden, so I don't need the extra passages of Vech to teach you anything. So it makes sense that that is the Vech is coming to tell you that all the avodas in the base of English are forbidden in all cases. According to the Shlaki, we do need a pasuk to tell you about avodah zarah, because naturally we think that you don't compare it to pigul. So we need a pasuk to tell you that if you shechted avodah zarah and you had a mind to roast the fat avodah zarah, the animal itself becomes treif. Avodah zarah. Maybe. So that's what it's for. So masculine Papa says, I don't understand your question. Why are you only asking on the Shlakish? Even Rabbi Yochanan, he says the animal is treif, but he doesn't talk about the person himself. What about the person? Maybe the person didn't do an avera, and that's why we need the pasuk zevech. Even according to Rabbi Yochanan, to tell you that if this is what happened, even though you shechted right now, you did nothing wrong, but because you had a bad thought, you're an oived avodah zarah. So your question is a very strong question, but even it goes to everybody. Why don't you ask about Rabbi Yochanan? Well, Rabbi Yochanan in a pasuk, Rabbi Yochanan only says the animal is no good, but the person is all right. And maybe the pasuk is a we need to teach you to tell you that the person who shechted the animal deserves to be killed. So even according to Rabbi Yochanan, zevech can be used regarding the person, and therefore your question is a very valid question. Maybe Ishtachava comes to tell you that any avodah for avodah zarah, as long as it's bekavadik, I don't care if it's a normal way, the not normal way, you're chayiv, and Zevech is going to teach you about avodah. Maskul Ravacha asked the question, the reverse, the inverse. Rabbi Yochanan, on the contrary, I don't understand your question in the first place. Even according to the Shlakish, we don't. Your question is not a question because we have nothing to do with the words of Vech. Why? Because the Shlakish is not saying that you're allowed to do this. He's saying the animal is kosher. All the Shlakish said is the animal is kosher because since when you shechted the animal, the shechit itself was done all right. You just had in mind another avodah no good. So we don't compare it to pigul, and the animal is kosher. But the person who did it, he's doing avodah zarah. Of course, he'll get killed. The person will get killed, so therefore I don't need zevech to talk to me about the person. Somebody bows down to a mountain. We learned before that if a person worships a mountain, the mountain itself does not become avodah zarah. Elahayim alaharim, the gods on the mountain, but not the mountain itself. Yet the person who worships the mountain will get killed because that's avodah zarah. The Messiah, but the person who does it will get avodah zarah, will get punished for avodah zarah. If he's a goy, he gets saif. So it's avodah zarah. So therefore, the Gemara concludes, I don't need Zavech to teach you anything. So therefore, Zavech must be to come to teach you that these three avodas that were done internally based on English, if you do them for any avodah zarah, even if it's not the normal way, you're chayiv. And Ishtachava is to tell you that bowing down, prostrating yourself, you're chayiv, even if it's not the normal way, but that's it. All other avodas that are bakavadik, it's an avera that you don't get killed for. Jason has an interesting question according to the Shlakish. The fact is that now that you shechted an animal for avodah zarah, we label you a mummer. And a mumer la'avodah zara is pasul l'kol ha'torah kula. A mumer looks at wine and see yain nesech. If a mumer shech to shchita is not kosher, so Teis asks a question. Even according, he wonders. According to the Shlokish, let's say the animal is not avodah zara, but can you eat from it, or do we say it's treif because you're a mumer? No, it's when do you become a mumer? When you started the shchita for avodah zara, or when you completed the shchita for avodah zara? Only then do you become a mumer. And in Shulchan and Beis Yardei is a big argument, a big discussion there, but interesting. Okay, have a shvuah, everybody.